Sounds good. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. Thank you.
Alrighty. We are now recording and we are now live. Welcome to folks who are joining us.
If you want to share the first slide, Tom.
Okay, I'm going to jump on and do that. Share content. Okay, I'm going to give us a minute or two before we get started, but want to welcome everybody to our POS disparity meeting, and we're going to be reviewing. We have a number of slides to go through. I'm just going to give it a few minutes here so we don't miss anybody. And for those of us that have joined us, hope you bear with us. We're getting better at this, but it's still an interesting world doing virtual presentations. And today's discussion is titled "Working Together Towards Equity." Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump in because people have a chance to join. We have a few preliminary slides. So please keep in mind, you will not be able to see yourself. You'll probably only be able to see the panelist. Your microphone is muted, but you can communicate with us through the Q&A box on the Zoom app, or you can also press *9 to ask a question if you're joining us by phone. Please note this virtual meeting will be recorded. Just a brief overview, general code of conduct. We're going to start with, talk about the people that we support, disparities in services, some of the data limitations about the services that we provide, and we're going to conclude looking at efforts that we're doing to increase equity. General code of conduct. Obviously, we're going to ask everyone to be positive and respectful, be patient, a good listener, try to understand different opinions, and wait with questions until the end of each slide. I'm going to be trying to monitor them, and I've got, and I really appreciate Sandy and Kate, who will be helping me to kind of field the questions to make sure that we answer questions, and we'll be answering them as we go, but at the end of each slide. So first off, I want to begin just talking briefly about some of the limitations to the data that we're going to be presenting. So everybody understands this data is representing fiscal year from July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019. So it's not including this current fiscal year. The numbers are tracked by the Department of Developmental Services, DDS. Some of the individuals depicted in the data are no longer a part of Westside Regional Center. That would include children that had reached the age of 3 and were found not eligible for Lanterman services, as well as individuals that were transferred out to another regional center. The data does not represent or include contracts for groups of people served. For example, we do group contracts for individuals receiving services like crisis support, supported employment, and transportation. Further, the money spent on contracts is not tracked in individual service reports known as POS, so it's not captured in this POS data. Further, everyone should understand the data it's not going to incorporate other generic resources and services, including Medi-Cal resources, private health insurance, special education services, and in-home support services. Since I'm doing this remotely, I'm also going to apologize as you hear trucks in the background, cats, dogs, any number of things coming through the back of my screen, and I apologize in advance. All right, let's start just talking about the people that we support in our population. So right now, our total number of clients that are supported or represented in the data that we're describing is 10,646 clients. Of those clients, the largest percentage, almost 3,700 individuals were identified with intellectual disabilities. Almost 3,500, the second largest of our population, are individuals identified with autism spectrum disorders. And in a smaller percentage, we have 377 individuals that are identified with what we call Category 5, and that's a condition similar to an intellectual disability. That might incorporate individuals that have borderline intellectual functioning, for example, that doesn't quite meet the criteria for a formal diagnosis of an intellectual disability, but requires some of the same supports and is identified as similar, meeting the criteria similar to somebody with intellectual disability. Finally, in a smaller percentage, we have 201 individuals identified with cerebral palsy and 99 individuals with epilepsy. Looking at the breakdown by ethnicity or race for all ages, the largest proportion of our population is individuals identifying as Hispanic. We have about almost 3,700 individuals. Our second largest population, almost 2,800 individuals identifying as white, Caucasian, followed by individuals identifying as African American, that's 2,263, and then individuals that are identifying as other ethnicity, and that could include individuals, for example, Pacific Islanders, individuals that are identifying as multiracial, might choose to identify themselves as other. And finally, we have 510 individuals that are identifying as Asian American. So next we're gonna take a look at, we're gonna break it down, ethnicity or race by age range. So we have three different groups. Our early start individuals are 0 to 2, and that's represented in blue. Our ages 3 to 21 are represented with red, and then the adult population 22 and above represented in what looks like an ochre or yellow. And so looking at each one of we're going to start with our largest population with Hispanic. In that group, you can see that the largest proportion of individuals supported would be in the ages 3 to 21, with about 1,700, followed by, we have 991 individuals identifying as adults, and 946 in our early start services, our 0 to 2 services. And if you look, and you can see that if you're looking at the data, that there are different proportional representation in different groups for different ethnicities. For example, as I just stated, in the Hispanic group, the largest proportion of individuals there are in the child, adolescent, and young adult 3 to 21 group. Whereas if you look at the group identifying as Caucasian, the largest population there are adults ages 22 plus, followed by the 3 to 21, and then followed with 697 in the early start. Now, if we look at African American, similarly, the largest population there is the ages 22 and above, followed by 3 to 21, and then followed by the early start with a much smaller proportion of individuals. And in the other ethnicity, largest proportion of the 3 to 21, followed by the 0 to 3, and then followed by 22 above. So if you can see it broken down, you can see that there's kind of a range with ethnicity and what proportion of the population is represented or supported. Finally, let's take a look at individuals in primary language. Those identifying as having English as the primary language spoken, and that's represented in blue. That's about 8,571 of those folks, followed by those identifying as Spanish speaking with almost 2,000. And then we have Farsi, we have about 54. And I would clarify for folks, we have what's called, as far as representing languages, and we have what's called threshold, that we have to meet a certain percentage of individuals that we support, representing them on the slide, that they're their primary language. So we have Farsi is our next language that met threshold, and then we have about 108 who identify speaking other languages that are not identified. We also have broken down the data of our population by residence type. So you can see that the majority of our population identifies as living at home with parent or guardian. That's about almost 8,800 individuals, followed by individuals that are independent or living in a supported living situation. That's approximately 950, followed by those in community care. And then foster homes, smaller percentage of the individuals that we support are living in ICF facilities, so about 120. And then in family home and skilled nursing and other scenarios. All right, so that's a kind of an overview of the population that we support. I don't know if there's any questions about just general the demographics. And if not, I'm going to move on and talk about just generally about some of the services and break down the demographics by the services that we provide. So we're going to kind of start off, we're going to look at, there's two different, we're going to look at the amount of services that were approved, and then also compare that with actually the services that were utilized, and these are per person across all age groups. So the largest amount that we're spending, that we authorized per person, authorized about $33,000 per person in the Caucasian group, whereas only about 26, almost 27,000 of that was actually utilized. And our next largest group, we authorized our less spending per person in African American was approximately a little bit, was about 31,000 were authorized, whereas about 24,000 were actually utilized. In the next largest spending group, we had per person, Asian Americans spending approximately 25,000 per person, compared with about 19,000 in services that were actually utilized by this group. And then in the other groups, we have individuals identifying as Hispanic. We spent approximately almost about 18,000 per person, or actually were authorized. And of that amount, 13,000 was actually utilized. And finally, we have the group identifying as other, where it's about 20,000, almost about 20,000 per person, and were services that were approved as opposed to about 15,000 in services that were utilized. So you can see that we have different amounts. Probably our largest spending group per person, Caucasian, followed by African American, followed by Asian American, then other, and spending the least amount per person with the Hispanic population. So looking at that, the amount spent on services, just looking at those, kind of breaking it down, just looking at services that were used per person by ethnicity or race for all ages. Again, the largest per person, almost $27,000 per person with individuals identifying as white, followed by about 25,000 per person used per person in the African American category, individuals identifying as African American. And then we have about 19,000 per person utilized by individuals identifying as Asian American, followed by 15,000 for individuals of other, and then the Hispanic population was spending about 13,000 per person for all ages. All right, so now just talking about the amount of services approved per person by age range. And, you know, I realize I don't want to go through each category, but just kind of trying to break it down quickly. And we have three categories. We're looking by age range. So we're looking at the amount that we spent on the adult population, 22 and above, compared with those spent for the age group 3 to 21, followed by our early start expenditures for children 0 to 2. You can see across all ethnicities, probably our largest amount spent per person is in the with individuals in the adult population, ages 22 and above, and it's pretty consistent with some of the statistics we saw before, where we were spending per person, the majority of funding per person on Caucasian group, followed by the followed by other ethnicity, then African American, Asian, and finally Hispanic. The second group, as far as spending, ages 3 to 21, our child population, child and young adult, is pretty consistent across categories as far as being significantly less spending per person than our adult population. And these numbers look a little bit more consistent, although, again, Caucasians spending 17,000 per person, African Americans about 16,800, and then followed by Asian Americans and with Hispanic. So pretty consistent as far as the disparity in per ethnicity. And you can also see that the majority of funding is with adults, followed by children, followed by our early start population. This is an easy group. So any questions to this point? Is there anything, you know, people are wondering about? And like I said, at the end of each slide, I'm kind of running through it, but if people have questions, feel free to throw in the chat box, and Kate or Sandy, feel free to interrupt me. We also have in this slide, so we're looking at, again, the amount spent on services used per person by age range. And this is pretty consistent. Again, we see that the amount spent on services, the largest amount is spent on the adult population, or those 22 and above. And per person, We're spending about $52,000 per person on Caucasians, followed by African Americans, followed by Asian Americans, other ethnicity groups, and then the individuals identifying as Hispanic. Our next largest group is those ages 3 to 21. And you see, if you're looking at the statistics, the numbers with the adult population are a little bit more varied. When we start talking about children and the 0 to 3, the numbers become a little bit more consistent across ethnic groups. Our largest disparity appears to be in adult services. So if you're looking at the bar graph, still we're looking at the Caucasian group spending the most per person, followed closely with individuals identifying as African American, then Asian Americans, other ethnicities, and individuals as Hispanic. And there's a similar breakdown with children in the early start services. And that's probably our most consistent spending across groups, is where there's probably the least amount of variability and disparity is in our early start service delivery. All right, we have on this one, we're looking, we're kind of breaking down our spending, looking at the amount that we spend on services used per person by residence type across different residents. So individuals living in residential settings probably accounts for the largest amount of our spending, followed by ILS, those individuals receiving ILS and SLS services. And then probably the least amount of our spending are those individuals that are living at home. And if you look at the bar graph, that's pretty consistent. So you don't see, so we're spending the most on residential, followed by ILS, followed by home care across all ethnic groups. And that does not really vary. Although there is some variation in the amount that we're spending, which kind of, if you're looking at it, sort of follows other models, other demographics that we've presented. We're spending the most per person on Caucasian individuals identifying as Caucasian, followed by in this one, Asian Americans, then Hispanic, then African Americans. Now this is a little bit different because consistently in other slides that we've looked at as far as spending per person, the second group is spending in residential situations has been African American, but in this particular residential slide, we see that the group that we're spending is other ethnicity groups, then followed by by Asian and then by Hispanic. Yeah, Kate, is there a question?
I do show someone with their hand up. They don't have a name listed, so I was just going to unmute them to acknowledge.
Okay.
Alrighty. My apologies, but you with your hand up, you should be able to speak.
Hello, it's Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
My question is, so what you actually classified that wasn't in the groups? That you say that it wasn't in what you classified it wasn't in.
Okay, so residential would be like living in like what we call an ICF facility, ARFISH, kind of a group home, or what's also known as sort of a congregate setting. Whereas the ILS, SLS group would be individuals that are living primarily independently with some support coming into the home and supporting them in the home, like ILS and SLS. Does that clarify?
So if I live independently, I'm actually considered a residential.
If you're living independently, let's say, and just maybe you have like a support person who's coming in and kind of helping out in the home, that would be an ILS SLS. If you're living with your family, it would be identified as home.
It gets confusing. So because I know some things it says something about non-residential.
Yeah, I agree with you, Elise. It is a little bit confusing when you're talking about, well, they're all living in some kind of residential situation. Just how we typically identify residential, though, we're talking about like, yeah, kind of a group home setting. So, you know, individuals, like 4 or more individuals sort of living together with 24-hour support on site would be kind of a residential situation. Whereas somebody living in an apartment and maybe, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, ILS worker comes to kind of like help with support, that would be considered the ILS, living in an independent living with ILS support. Does that make it clear?
Yeah, a little bit.
But I agree with you. It is a little confusing because when you're talking about residential and just typical, like we're having a conversation, well, we're all living in residential situations. So, but that's how we kind of identify it as far as purchasing services.
Yeah, thank you. I know I doesn't have my name next to it.
Yeah, it's kind of how it breaks down. All right, well, thank you for the question, though. Hopefully that helps.
Tom, I also have someone else with their hand up.
Okay.
Hannah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, okay? Alrighty, Hannah, you can go ahead and ask a question.
Oh, my apologies. I did that by mistake. Please continue.
No worries, thank you.
Well, that was an easy question, Hannah. Thank you. All right. Yeah, and as you can see, as we go along, we're free to take questions. So, you know, raise your hand or just, you know, write it in queue or *9 if you didn't get the beginning of this, if you're on the phone with us. And I apologize. I know some people can actually see the slides. Some people are just listening to the information. So if it sounds a little tedious, I mean, I am trying to kind of read the numbers to give you an idea if you're not able to actually visually see the slides.
I did email the slides to everybody who registered. So if you registered before about 3:30 today, you should have a copy of this in whatever email inbox that you sent.
So as you can see, Kate's usually one step ahead of me, which is not hard. Thank you, Kate. All right, so the next slide we're talking about number of people with ILS, SLS services, looking at all ages. And here we're looking at different ethnic groups. Our largest population, individuals identifying as white. We have about 427 receiving ILS, SLS services. Next largest population being those identifying as African American, followed by those identifying as Hispanic. And finally, we have about 60 individuals receiving ILS, SLS services identifying as other ethnicity, and only 33 individuals identifying as Asian American. All right, so let's disparities in services. Just generally talking about people who are receiving services with and without services. So based on the DDS data for statuses 1, 2, and 0, just to kind of clarify for those of you not used to that, some of the jargon, status 1 would be our early individuals with our early start program that are eligible for early start services. Status 2 are 3 and older, eligible for Lanterman services, and those 0 means that they're currently in intake. We're assessing them to see if they're eligible for ongoing services. Of the individuals in our population, you see, fortunately, largest population of 9,144 individuals receiving some type of services, but we still have about 1,500 that are not receiving any services. So they're they're with us, they're identified as eligible for services, but not receiving any services. And then if we break down those individuals that are not receiving any POS services by ethnicity, we can see that the largest proportion of our population not receiving POS services are individuals identifying as Hispanic, about 588, almost 600 individuals, 286 individuals identifying as African American, and then followed by, we have about 364 individuals. Actually, our second largest group, I'm sorry, is our Caucasian group, followed by individuals identifying as African American, and then the other ethnicity, and 61 individuals Asian American. We also looked at age groups without services, looking across longitudinally. So over the last 8 years, we see that, so we have the individuals in our early start services, ages 3 to 21, and our adult services. And you can see that the largest group across ages not receiving without services has been consistently in our children's services, ages 3 to 21. And so currently we have about 27% of our population, 27% identifying as 3 to 21, as opposed to, and if you look at, and I apologize, I'm not going to go into all the percentages, but just in general, what you can see is kind of looking at the trend over the years. It's been a little bit more variability in adults without services. And in the next group, children without services, 3 to 21. And then in the adult 22 and above, that's significantly less that are not receiving services. So currently we have about, for example, we have about 7.3% of individuals without services as compared to 27.4% of folks in the 3 to 21 without services. And then one of the most heartening statistics for me, we can see over the last several years, that we have a very small percentage of individuals in our early start programs that are not receiving services. So currently only about 0.9%, and that number has gone down. I don't know what's happening in 2012 and 2013, but you can see that we've made some improvement in making sure that all of our individuals with the early start services are receiving services, POS services. Okay, so we're going to go to the next. So before we go into what we're kind of doing to address service disparities, I know it's a lot of information. So any questions at this point before we segue into kind of talking about what we're doing and our efforts to reduce service disparities? And Sandy, you're going to take this from here?
I'm gonna take the wheel from you.
Okay, well, here, hold on.
I'm gonna steer the car.
Okay. All right, good luck. Thank you. And so Sandy will be talking about what we're doing at service disparities.
Okay, so next slide. Tom, next slide.
Oh, I'm in charge. I forgot.
Yeah,
I thought you took the wheel. I was like, I'm done,
yeah.
Sandy. Okay.
No. So hi, everyone. My name is Sandy. I am the Culture, Diversity, and Community Engagement Specialist. So what that really means is that I'm in charge of a lot of our grants that we're applying through DDS under the Disparity Grants program. And also, I'm in charge of our website and our social media and anything to get the word out to our staff and our community about things that are going on in the community or here at Westside. So I just want to talk about some grants that were completed. So our enhanced case management and our parent empowerment project supported 561 African American, Black, and Hispanic Latino clients and their families. They assisted them in learning how to navigate various systems. So not only our regional center system, but also special education, public social services. So it can be like Medi-Cal, IHSS, SSI, that kind of stuff. So they successfully were able to help these individuals access 625 regional center services, and also accessing 1,246 public and community services. So those regional center services could have been psych evaluations, respite, social skills, ABA, transportation, immigration services. As for public and community services, is getting individuals to be eligible for Medi-Cal, helping them with IHSS, even like special education services, getting them a lawyer, stuff like that. And these individuals were identified as having little to no services. So as Tom mentioned before, these are individuals that weren't accessing services that the regional center was playing. Next slide, or question, I think.
Yes, there is a question. Can you summarize in general how numbers have changed from last year to this? So I believe they're speaking towards the last few slides.
Oh, for Tom?
Mm-hmm. It came in just as you
okay.
transitioned. Tom, you're muted.
Okay, I'm just talking to myself. It's nothing new. And Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you know the statistics probably better than I do, but looking at those individuals receiving POS services versus those with no POS services, we've definitely improved on that metric. Looking at some of the disparity, things that I wish we'd move the needle on more, where it seems fairly consistent, is some of the disparity between spending per person. I don't think we've seen a little bit of movement on that, particularly in the early start service delivery, where that's kind of been more consistent. But our kind of ongoing disparity is our spending over with individuals in the adult population, where it's been kind of fairly consistent this year versus last year, to be honest. Sandy, anything that you'd add to that?
Yeah, just to add comments or just feedback that our enhanced case management staff and our parent leaders had mentioned, is that a lot of families are kind of trying to meet their basic needs. So housing, rent, health, all that stuff. So before they can really access any regional center services, they're kind of looking to meet their most basic needs, because they can't really imagine having ABA or someone as a respite provider when really they're in need of someone to, give them a place to live or pay for food or deal with the school district. So I think that's kind of the reason why it was kind of difficult to move the needle in regards to POS, is that there's so many things, there's so many other things going around that the family needs to address before they can really access the regional center service. And I think that's what our enhanced case management staff and our parent leaders from PEP are kind of finding out, is that it is very, very difficult to get all the needs met in such a short period of time. And I think that's why we're, as I'm going to mention right now, things that we've been doing to try to address this issue.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. You want to go on?
Okay. So how are we helping our families or just individuals access information? So if you haven't done so, please follow us on our YouTube channel, on Facebook and Instagram. We're constantly adding information. So if you want to know up-to-date information, please follow us. We do have an e-newsletter. So if you go on our website, on our homepage, and you'll be finding a section that says subscribe, and then you can enter your email, and then you'll be hearing from upcoming events, maybe letters from our board of directors, or maybe from Tom about any changes, or maybe even DDS directives. We do have a website that we're constantly updating every single day. You're able to find services by age range. So if you have a 3-year-old, there is a section for 0 to 3. If you have someone in school age, there's a school age section. We do have our events calendar, so if you want to know any upcoming trainings or support groups going on, we encourage you to go on the website. We also have a latest news section, maybe want to inform you about something that's coming up or something important for you to know. It will be on our homepage. And we also have a lot of resources. So we do have a resource page for general resources, and we do have a COVID specific resource page. So if you hear about someone's providing rent assistance or helping renters pay their landlords in the city of Glendale, then you hear about that there. If we need information about accessing you know, their internet or getting Wi-Fi or a laptop that's low cost, we'll have information there on that page as well. Also updating families about anything that's related to COVID and our special population will also be available on our website. We also have our YouTube channel. So if you just type in Westside Regional Center and you search it, you'll find our logo on it. We do have an education series. So if you want to learn about our regional center, about service coordination, the appeal process, anything like that, it will be on there. We also have a lot of recorded trainings and meetings that now that we're holding it virtually, we do want people to access it. We do understand that people are working, or, you know, it's not a great time at the time that we're filming this or making it live. So we are putting it on our YouTube channel. For example, this POS meeting will be on our YouTube channel. Next slide. Access to services. So something really great that our enhanced case management staff did for us, which I'm really grateful for, is that they did brochures by age range. So like I said before, if you want to know what services are available for your 9-year-old, you will look at the brochure that's for those between the ages of 3 to 10. If let's say that your young adult or adolescent has just graduated from high school, or, you know, anything like that, you'll probably look at the 18 to 22 brochure. And then you have someone that's older, if you're a self-advocate, we would encourage you to look at the 23 and older brochure. So it will mention all services that you may qualify for. And once again, you do have to talk to your service coordinator to see if it's something appropriate for you. But we do want you to be aware of the services that are being offered and that you may qualify for. An information and resource booklet was also created. So you can learn all about our regional center. You can learn about what your role is as a parent, what the role of your service coordinator is, how to ask for a service, how to appeal. And there's also a lot of great resources like mental health resources, resources about knowing your rights. We also have our transition from high school to adulthood booklet. And it's really great. It was created in partnership with the FRC, our education advocates, our employment specialists, our training specialists. A lot of people came together to create this booklet. It's targeted for those between the ages of 14 to 22. So it's a checklist. So you can learn about the IEP, the ITP. Maybe you're not sure whether you want to you know, go after a diploma, or if you want to do certificate completion. It talks about things you should think about in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11, 12. If you're thinking about going to college, it's a really great checklist for you to check off. It will talk about, you know, health. It can talk about making friends, anything legal, all that stuff. And it's really great. So that's available on our website under resources. We also have Understanding the Diagnosis, a guide for families. So that was created with our psychologists and our physicians. It talks about autism, some really great resources and you should know, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability. It's a great resources. So any service coordinators are listening, you have a family that, you know what, just kind of wants to find out more information, I strongly encourage that you share that resource. Or if you have anyone part of support groups that you want to share with someone that's new to regional center, that's also really a great handout for you to access. Next slide. So I just want to talk about our new project that was funded this past March of 2020. Next slide. So just some background. This project is really created, you know, based on feedback that we heard from our underserved Black and Latino families that were taking part of our enhanced case management and our parent empowerment project, as well as the survey that we sent over to around 2,000 individuals that we served back in 2017. Some things that were identified, and it's not all of them, but just ones I want to point out, is that families felt that there was like a lack of knowledge of available services and supports. So they just felt that some parents are more informed than they were, or they just felt that I didn't know there was a service out there that I could have accessed. And also not knowing how to obtain that regional center service. So many families are like, now I'm aware that there's a service, I just don't know how to access it. Like, what process do I need to do in order to have that service, or how can I qualify for that service? That also meant, talked about communication. So sometimes I felt that, you know, maybe there was no real follow through on their service coordinators. Maybe they felt that things are really communicated well, anything like that. Also lack of confidence in Westside Regional Center. So a lot of families felt that service coordinators weren't really telling them everything that was out there for them. They kind of felt that there was a lack of follow through, that things weren't really being known to families, and they just kind of felt that, you know, they weren't really confident that they were getting all the honest information from the regional center. And some comments that families shared is that, and like, how can we improve as a regional center? They wanted us to inform us when the services are available and inform the family how they can get those services. They did want a lot of workshops or any trainings or anything to really educate themselves about what the future is going to look like for their child, and just, you know, just see what's coming up in the future. And they also really wanted to help with transition of services. One of the family members I'd mentioned is that they kind of felt that when they were exiting Early Start program, they kind of felt lost, like they weren't sure what the next step was or who they should contact, what resources were out there. And even for adult services, so as you know, individuals are leaving the school district and coming back to the regional center, or, you know, talking to DOR or anything like that, they kind of felt lost. They kind of felt that, you know, Westside Regional Center could do something better to really inform the families about, you know, empowering themselves, you know, attaining knowledge or to access information. And it's kind of the background of why we created this project. Next slide. So our project is called Creating Successful Transitions. As I mentioned before, it was funded by our DDS, Disparity Funds Program. We received $106,018 for 12 months, beginning March of 2020. They funded us for 2 workshop series. We have the Early Childhood Transition Workshop and our High School to Community Life Transition Workshop. So our target audience is, we want to reach out to 150 Latinos, 100 Black African American, and 50 who identify as other and multicultural. Next slide. So our Early Childhood Transition Workshop is for parents and guardians of children ages 2.5 to 8 transitioning out of the Early Start program. The intention of this workshop is really to prepare families in navigating the regional center system, the school system, and any community or public service systems. So they can just be like mommy and me groups, talk time. It can be private or public childcare. It can be, you know, any other kind of program that a family might benefit from. We wanted to offer them resources to support them during this transition period and beyond. For example, a checklist of things they should think about, maybe a determination flow chart, you know, just hearing from our Early Start managers and stuff like that. And our goal was to offer it 4 times a year. So a lot of families are transitioning out at different times. So we want to make sure that they were at least able to access a type of workshop so they can kind of be supported and be ready for that transition. Next slide. We also have our High School to Community Life Transition Workshop. It's for adolescents and young adults ages 14 to 21 and their families who are exiting the school district into life in the community. The intention was to make it specific to each grade and high school completion options. So a 9th grader who is you know, thinking about a high school diploma, or a 9th grader who maybe has a bit of a need and maybe won't really excel in the academics that would be high school diploma, therefore certificate completion might be the route for them. We also just want to prepare students for life after college, life after high school. So this would be college, employment, internships, day services, maybe even living independently. And our goal was to offer 5 times a year, but really it's just more It's 5 workshops, 4 grades in high school, and then 1 for life after high school. So technically 5 workshops in 1 year. Next slide. So unfortunately, what happened is that COVID came into play. So this really beautiful grant that we wrote back in October 2019, we couldn't really do it that way, because the whole point of the workshops is to do it in person. And because of COVID, we really can't gather or be at the office, or families are not feeling really safe to be around others who are not part of their household. We decided to make some changes. So one of them is making the series online instead of in person. The series will be recorded live and later available on our website, YouTube channel, and Facebook. So for those of you who missed out on our early start or early childhood transition workshops, it is available on our website, on our YouTube channel, and even on our Facebook video section. So in case you missed out, go ahead and check it out. Our next upcoming series is our high school transition series. So we decided as part of our work group is that we really want to send a survey out to our community just to request feedback on what their current needs are, to kind of guide the training topics. So what we assume would be something we'd be training them on before, it kind of doesn't make sense. A lot of our booklet was about, SATs, ACTs, living in a dorm. We were talking about, things to do at school. And since everything is changing, we kind of want to hear from parents themselves of what are you looking for, what information you need, and then kind of go off based on that to develop a training series where we're going to invite, school district representatives. You want to invite people from colleges, recent graduates, parents to kind of be guest speakers, and develop this really great workshop that will hopefully benefit families and even our transition age youth. Next slide. So any questions for me or for Tom or anything based on this presentation, go ahead and raise your hand and Kate will unmute you. Hit *9 if you're on your phone, or send us questions on the Q&A section.
I see Portia with your hand up. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, okay?
Hi, my name is Portia. I had a question. Okay, you said you have classes for how old? Like, you have classes for like 8 years old people, like eight years old.
Yeah. So we had a transition series. We had it back in May, but it's everything that we shared with individuals. It's available on our YouTube channel, on our website, and on Facebook. So we are going to start planning workshops for those who are 8. So what we really want to focus on is that, let's say that you were 8 and you were found out eligible when you were 3, but you're starting to notice that, hey, my child is really developing signs that they really should be reassessed by the regional center. We want to provide them support so they will return back to the regional center, and then we can collaborate with the school district on meeting the needs of that child.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
And you have people for 54 under go to school too? No?
That one is mostly based for those between the ages of 14 and 22. But I mean, if you think that there's a need for those who are 54 that we serve who want to go back to school, that's not something we thought of, but that's something we can definitely try to create a training for.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
This is going to be an easy group. You're going to let us off easy, huh? And certainly, if you think of questions later, we have, Sandy, can you remind me? I can never remember the email. We have like a a general information email set up where we do receive questions. So people kind of think of things later, which is usually how I am in these conferences or presentations, is I kind of think about things after the fact. Info WRC@westsidrc.org. Yeah, thank you, Sandy.
Alrighty, it looks like Alyssa has a question. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you, Alyssa.
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I have a question. So this means that so if a client gets transferred to Westside from another regional center, will that client get services right away, or how does it work? Because I recently got transferred.
Well, there shouldn't, I mean, there's usually a little bit of we have to, the chart gets sent out, we have to receive it, and then it gets assigned. So there's usually a little bit of break, but we really try to minimize the, so that there's no real gap. And usually if you're already receiving services and they're in the same area, you're relatively same area, there usually isn't that much of a gap. So you shouldn't anticipate there being any real substantial gap in services.
Alrighty, I show Portia, you have your hand up again. Did you have another question? You're unmuted.
Okay, you have to be disabled to roll in these classes for the kids, or you just could come, you know, don't be disabled. Do we have to pay them, or the original center's paying us for the class for the kids?
So for the classes, they're always free. If they're not free, we normally make a note if it's not. And it's really just open. So if you have a child with a disability, you yourself have a disability, or you're just someone who wants to be informed about what we're teaching, certainly everyone's available or open to participate in their trainings.
You have to be a original center person?
No, I mean, if you're just someone that's not original person, but you just kind of want to learn about what our regional center does, or what kind of supports or resources we're providing for our target population, you're more than welcome to participate. We're not saying that you have to have a disability to participate. We just want everyone to be able to access these kind of trainings if you need it. Then again, let's say that the training is specifically for service providers or specifically for a certain type of professional, and it's a closed group, then we will mention it on our event calendar that it's a closed group. But other than that, we normally just invite everyone to participate if they're, have time and they want to participate.
You have to take a test
To participate in the trainings?
Yeah, do you need to take a test for the kids?
No. I mean, if you're talking about becoming a client of the regional center, then that's something different.
Yeah, if I'm not no client, how do I know? Say I live by myself, do I have to, what I have to do to apply to be on for the regional center? If I'm not no client, And I have a job and everything, how like I do get to the regional center?
Mm-hmm. Tom or Caesar, do you guys want to take that question?
Can you repeat it?
Okay. Say I got my own place, and I'm not rolling in the regional center, and then I want to come to Westside. How like to do this? What I need to do?
So if you're currently not eligible for regional center services and you would like to become eligible for regional center services and supports?
Yeah, what kind of things I need to do to get to regional center?
Okay, so if you look on our website, there should be an intake form. You can do it online. You can also call. We have somebody who can, and I'm trying to find the number here. But you can call our main line 310-258-4000, because we've got people that are, we got reception currently receiving calls, and ask for intake and assessment. And then we are still doing intake services, so we're still doing assessments. It's kind of interesting now because we're doing assessments remotely. So an intake counselor would then call you and get all your information. And we would do an assessment remotely, also trying to get any kind of records. So again, you can either go online and look at intake, and then there's an assessment, there's a referral form on there that you could submit online, or you can call 258-4000. And I don't know if you can see it, but Sandy just put up the information for doing an intake. And it's on our website, and 258-4000 if you just want to call and just ask for, say you want intake, adult intake. Does that answer? Is that the question?
Yeah, I just want to know if my kid's not disabled, she could roll in anytime she wants to get to like a day. I want to roll my kid like a day program. If we're gonna, and she not have no disabled problem, if she still could go to regional center still.
Well, I mean, we would have to assess her in order to receive supports and services from the regional center. You're usually identified as having some type of disability, like an intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, epilepsy. She would have to have some kind of a disability in order to be found eligible and qualified for receiving supports and services from regional center.
If she don't have that, she still can't roll.
How old is she?
She's 17.
And what kind of program are you looking for exactly? Is she in,
Well,
she's in school?
Well, my daughter, I'm trying to find her like a job, you know, because she's nothing wrong with her. She used to work in the mall, but now she's not working now, this virus. I just want her to find something to do.
Yeah, I hear you there. I have two old adult children that are both unemployed as well right now. And I think a lot of people, and she should still be, if she's 17, she should still be enrolled in school. And I would be curious to know from the school district what kind of supports and services, because they're still responsible for kind of helping out in that. Yeah, a lot of school programs, I don't know if it's current or not, but they should still be having different kind of employment services that you could, being able to access jobs. And when she gets older, you know, Department of Rehabilitation, but she's 17 or younger, she should still be getting some supports right now from the school district. They still have a responsibility.
Right. Yeah, she wants something to do. She needs a job.
I hear you.
Okay.
All right, other questions?
No, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, of course, of course. All right, guys, and again, so I guess we'll close out at this point if there's no further questions. Everybody does have the PowerPoints. I know it's a lot of information. If questions do come up, feel free to email us at info@Westside Regional Center, and that was put in the chat box. It's also on our website. You can find that there's an email that you can access, info@Westside Regional Center at westsidrc.org. And feel free to give us questions later. And until then, I hope everybody stays safe and stays well. So this is in our new normal. thanks everybody for listening in, and I appreciate your patience. I know it was a lot of information, so thank you. And Sandy and Kate, and to our translation staff, thank you so much. You guys, I really appreciate all the support, and thanks to everybody chiming in. All right, good night, everybody.